To those who knew her, Hollie Gazzard was more than a name in the news. She was a daughter, a friend, and someone with a future still unfolding. Her story begins not with headlines, but with a young woman living an ordinary life, unaware of the moment that would define her legacy. On a cold February evening in 2014, in the quiet city of Gloucester, England, a young woman named Hollie Gazzard was working her shift at a hair salon called Fringe Benefits and La Belle Hair and Beauty. She was 20 years old, vibrant and full of life, with dreams of building her career as a hairdresser. But that night, something unthinkable happened. In front of colleagues and in the place where she felt safe, Hollie's life was brutally taken from her by someone she once trusted. Her ex-partner, a man with a history of violence that the system had failed to stop, walked into her workplace and stabbed her 14 times. Hollie's story is one that shakes you to your core, not just because of the horror of what happened, but because of how preventable it could have been. This is the story of Hollie Gazzard, a young woman whose legacy now fights to protect others from the same fate. Hollie was the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. Her family and friends described her as fun, vivacious, caring, and creative. She had this natural warmth that drew people to her, and she brought energy and joy to everyone around her. Hollie had a deep passion for fashion and beauty, but it was hairdressing that truly captured her heart. It wasn't just a job for her, it was her art, her way of connecting with people, her way of making others feel good about themselves. In November 2012, she began training at the Steiner Academy in London, preparing for what she thought would be an exciting adventure working on cruise ships. While she waited for her placement to begin, she worked at a bar called Zest Bar, where her outgoing and bubbly personality made her a natural behind the counter. Everyone who met her remembered her smile. In the spring of 2013, Hollie's dream came true when she joined the Carnival Sensation cruise ship in the Bahamas. It was there that she met a colleague named Rebecca Webster, who would later share memories of their time together. Rebecca said that from the first moment they met, Hollie was filled with excitement and enthusiasm. Her smile was contagious, and with her personality and love for life, she wasn't someone you could ever forget. Hollie was living the adventure she had hoped for, traveling to beautiful places, meeting new people, and doing what she loved. But as time went on, Hollie realized that life at sea wasn't quite what she had imagined. The constant movement, the distance from home, the isolation from her family and friends, it started to weigh on her. She missed the familiar comforts of home, the people she loved, the life she had built in England. So Hollie made the decision to return. She moved back to London first, taking a position at the Edge Hair and Beauty in Edgware, but her heart was pulling her even closer to home. In August 2013, she moved back to Gloucester, the city where she had grown up, where her family was, where she felt she truly belonged. Back in Gloucester, Hollie joined the team at Fringe Benefits and La Belle Hair and Beauty in the city center, and it didn't take long for her to become a favorite among both her colleagues and her clients. People loved her creativity, her kindness, the way she made them feel special. She also worked part-time at the King Teddy pub in Long Levens alongside her sister Chloe. Life was good. Hollie was home, doing what she loved, surrounded by people who cared about her. She was building the life she wanted. But there was a shadow lurking in the background, one that would soon destroy everything. Hollie had been in a relationship with a man who, on the surface, might have seemed like just another boyfriend. But behind closed doors, the relationship was anything but normal. He was controlling, he was abusive, he monitored her every move, dictated who she could see and what she could do, and made her feel like she was walking on eggshells every single day. This wasn't love, this was control, manipulation, and abuse. And Hollie, like so many victims of domestic abuse, found herself trapped in a cycle that's incredibly difficult to break. But Hollie was strong. She recognized that the relationship was toxic, that it was hurting her, and she made the brave decision to end it. She walked away. She told him it was over. And for many people, that would be the end of the story. But for victims of domestic abuse, leaving is often the most dangerous time. After Hollie ended the relationship, her ex-partner didn't just accept it and move on. He began stalking her. He wouldn't leave her alone. He showed up at her workplace, sent her messages, made her feel like she couldn't escape him no matter what she did. And then, just days before her murder, he stole her bank card. Hollie did what she was supposed to do. She reported it to the police. She told them what was happening. She asked for help. But the system failed her. Despite her report, despite the clear warning signs, despite the fact that this man had a history of violence, nothing was done to protect her. He had been arrested 23 times before. 23 times. He had been violent with Hollie before. He had been violent with 2 other former partners. The pattern was there, clear as day, but it went largely unchecked. And on February 18, 2014, he walked into Hollie's workplace and murdered her. The attack was brutal and senseless. Hollie was stabbed 14 times in front of her colleagues, in the place where she should have been safe, doing the job she loved. She was just 20 years old. Her whole life was ahead of her. She had dreams, plans, people who loved her, a future that was stolen from her in the most horrific way imaginable. The news of Hollie's death sent shockwaves through Gloucester and beyond. People couldn't believe it. How could this happen? How could someone so young, so full of life, be taken in such a violent way? And how could the system have failed her so completely? Her family was devastated. Her parents, Nick and Amanda, and her sister Chloe, were left to pick up the pieces of a life that had been shattered beyond repair. But in the midst of their unimaginable grief, Hollie's family made a decision. They decided that Hollie's death would not be in vain. They were determined to ensure that something positive came from this tragedy, that Hollie's story would be used to protect others, to raise awareness, to create change, and so the Hollie Gazzard Trust was born. The charity was founded by Nick, Amanda, and Chloe with a clear mission: to prevent domestic abuse and stalking, to educate people about the warning signs, to empower individuals to recognize abuse and respond safely, and to create a safer future in Hollie's name. Education is at the heart of everything the Trust does. They go into schools, colleges, universities, businesses, and community groups, raising awareness about domestic abuse and stalking, challenging harmful behaviors, and opening up conversations that matter. One of the most significant things the Hollie Gazzard Trust has done is develop an app called Hollie Guard. It's a personal safety app that, once downloaded to a smartphone, is designed to protect individuals from potential harm through several features. The app is free to charge and currently has around 500,000 users. It's a tool that can literally save lives, and it's all in Hollie's name. The Trust also works tirelessly to share Hollie's story, to make sure that people understand the reality of domestic abuse and stalking, to show that it can happen to anyone, and to emphasize the importance of early intervention. Hollie's case has even been featured in the Netflix true crime documentary series It's My Lover, My Killer, in Series 2, Episode 3. The documentary helps raise greater awareness of the warning signs and dangers of coercive relationships, reaching a global audience and ensuring that Hollie's story continues to make an impact. What makes Hollie's story so heartbreaking is that it reflects the experiences of so many others facing abuse today. Domestic abuse and stalking are not rare occurrences. They happen every single day, in every community, to people of all ages, backgrounds, and walks of life. And too often, the warning signs are missed, the reports are ignored, and the victims are left unprotected. Hollie reported what was happening to her. She did everything right, but the system let her down, and that's why the work of the Hollie Gazzard Trust is so important. They're not just raising awareness, they're actively working to change the systems that failed Hollie, to ensure that other victims get the protection and support they need, and to create a culture where abuse is recognized, challenged, and stopped before it's too late. The Trust's workshops and training programs are designed to empower people with the knowledge and tools they need to recognize abuse, whether it's happening to them or to someone they know. They teach people about the warning signs of controlling and coercive behavior, about the tactics that abusers use to manipulate and isolate their victims, and about the resources and support that are available. They also work to challenge the attitudes and beliefs that allow abuse to continue, to break down the stigma that prevents victims from speaking out, and to create a society where everyone feels safe and supported. It's work that requires courage, compassion, and commitment, and Hollie's family has shown all three in abundance. Hollie's legacy is one of hope and resilience. Out of the darkest tragedy imaginable, her family has created something that is making a real difference in the world. They've turned their grief into action, their pain into purpose, and their loss into a legacy that will protect and empower others for years to come. Every person who downloads the Hollie Guard app, every student who attends a workshop, every individual who learns to recognize the signs of abuse and takes action to help someone in need is a testament to Hollie's enduring impact. She may have been taken from this world far too soon, but her spirit lives on in the work of the trust and in the lives that are being saved because of it. It's important to remember that domestic abuse and stalking are not just about physical violence. They're about power and control. Abusers use a range of tactics to dominate their victims, including emotional manipulation, isolation, financial control, threats, and intimidation. The abuse often starts small and escalates over time, making it difficult for victims to recognize what's happening until they're already deeply entangled. And leaving an abusive relationship is incredibly difficult and dangerous. Many victims are at the greatest risk of serious harm or death when they try to leave, which is why it's so important that they have access to support, protection, and resources. The Hollie Gazzard Trust understands this, and their work is designed to address all aspects of abuse, from prevention and education to support and intervention. Hollie Gazzard was a beautiful, talented, and loving young woman whose life was cut tragically short, but her legacy is one of strength, courage, and hope. Her family has taken the worst thing that could ever happen to them and turned it into a force for good, a movement that is changing lives and saving lives every single day. They've ensured that Hollie's name will always be remembered, not just for the tragedy of her death, but for the positive impact she continues to have on the world, and that's something truly powerful. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light. Even in the face of unimaginable loss, there is hope. And even when evil tries to win, love and compassion can prevail. Gracie Spinks was 23 years old, close to her family, and quietly building a life she was proud of. In June 2021, an ordinary summer day in Sheffield took a turn that would leave her loved ones searching for answers and justice, turning her name into a case that continues to raise difficult questions. On a quiet Friday morning in June, a young woman left her home at 7:30 to care for her horse, just as she did every day. Her mother watched her go, never imagining it would be the last time she'd see her daughter alive. Less than an hour later, Gracie Spinks would be found unconscious in a field in Derbyshire, England, and a man would be seen running away. At first, people thought the horse had kicked her, but when paramedics arrived, they realized something far more sinister had happened. By 9:10 that morning, 23-year-old Gracie was dead, and the tragedy that unfolded that day would expose a series of failures that her family says could have prevented her murder. Gracie Spinks was born on October 19, 1997, in Old Whittington, Derbyshire. She was a lifeguard and swimming instructor, someone who spent her days keeping others safe. But at the time of her death, she'd been working as a warehouse operative. Outside of work, Gracie had a passion that brought her joy and peace. She was a keen horse rider and kept a horse at Blue Lodge Farm in Duckmanton. It was this love of horses, this daily routine of caring for an animal she cherished, that would ultimately put her in harm's way on that June morning. But to understand what happened to Gracie, we need to go back several months earlier. In February of 2021, Gracie had reported a former colleague to the police. His name was Michael Sellers, and he had been her supervisor at a warehouse where she once worked. Gracie told police that Sellers was stalking her. She was frightened enough to make an official report, to put her concerns on record, to ask for help. This wasn't a casual complaint. This was a young woman reaching out to the authorities because she felt unsafe. Then, in May of 2021, something deeply disturbing happened. Someone discovered a bag near the site where Gracie would eventually be killed. Inside that bag were weapons, a hammer, an axe, knives. These weren't tools left behind by a farmer or groundskeeper. This was a cache of weapons found near the place where Gracie kept her horse, where she went every single day at a predictable time. The police were notified about this discovery. They knew about it. They had this information. But the connection wasn't made. Nobody linked this bag of weapons to the stalking complaint Gracie had filed just months earlier. On the morning of June 18, 2021, Gracie left her home at 7:30. Her mother saw her go. Gracie was heading to Blue Lodge Farm to tend to her horse, just like always. It was routine. It was normal. It was supposed to be safe. But shortly after 8 in the morning, Gracie was found unconscious in the field where her horse was kept. A witness saw a man running away from the scene. When paramedics arrived and began treating Gracie, they quickly realized this wasn't an accident. She hadn't been kicked by her horse. She had been attacked. They called the police immediately. Despite the efforts of the paramedics, Gracie was declared dead at 8:50 that morning. A post-mortem examination would later reveal the horrific nature of her injuries. She had died from a stab wound that severed an artery in her spine. The attack had been brutal and fatal. There was no evidence that she had been sexually assaulted, but the violence inflicted upon her was devastating. A young woman who had simply gone to care for her horse had been murdered in a field in broad daylight. At 11 o'clock that same morning, less than 3 hours after Gracie was declared dead, Michael Sellers was found dead in a field less than a mile away. Police believe that Sellers was responsible for Gracie's murder and that he killed himself afterwards. The man who had stalked her, the man she had reported to police, the man whose behavior had frightened her enough to seek help, had taken her life and then his own. Separate inquests were held into both deaths, but for Gracie's family, the questions were just beginning. After Gracie's murder, Derbyshire police did something that suggested they knew there were problems with how they'd handled the case. They referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct because of their previous contact with Gracie. This wasn't a routine referral. This was an acknowledgement that something had gone wrong. And when the investigation was completed, the findings were damning. Disciplinary notices were served on 5 police officers. 5 officers who had been involved in decisions that might have saved Gracie's life. 2 officers were served with notices over their handling of Gracie's allegations of stalking against Michael Sellers. When Gracie came forward in February, frightened and asking for help, these officers had the power to take action. They could have investigated more thoroughly. They could have taken her fears more seriously. They could have done more to protect her. But they didn't, and Gracie paid the ultimate price for that failure. 3 more officers, a sergeant and 2 constables, were served with misconduct orders over the steps they took after discovering that bag of weapons in May. Think about that for a moment. A bag containing a hammer, an axe, and knives was found near the exact location where a young woman who had reported being stalked kept her horse. A young woman who went to that location every single day at a predictable time. And nobody connected the dots. Nobody thought to warn Gracie. Nobody increased patrols in the area. Nobody treated this discovery with the urgency it deserved. That bag of weapons sat there, a clear and present danger, and nothing was done to protect the woman who was clearly the intended target. Gracie's parents have been devastated not just by the loss of their daughter, but by the knowledge that her death might have been prevented. They have said publicly that Gracie was failed by police, and it's hard to argue with that assessment. When a young woman reports being stalked, when weapons are found near the place she visits daily, when all the warning signs are there, and still nothing is done to protect her, that is a failure, a catastrophic, unforgivable failure. But Gracie's family hasn't let their grief paralyze them. Instead, they've channeled it into action. They've campaigned for something they call Gracie's Law, which would increase funding for investigating stalking cases. Because Gracie's story isn't unique. She's not the only woman who has reported being stalked and not been taken seriously. She's not the only victim whose warnings were ignored until it was too late. Stalking is often dismissed as a minor crime, something that doesn't warrant serious police resources. But stalking is frequently a precursor to violence. It's a warning sign that someone is fixated, obsessed, and potentially dangerous. And when those warnings are ignored, people die. The tragedy of Gracie Spinks is that her murder was preventable. She did everything right. She reported her stalker to the police. She asked for help. She tried to protect herself, but the system that was supposed to protect her failed. The officers who were supposed to investigate her complaint didn't do enough. The officers who found the weapons didn't make the connection. And on a June morning, while doing something as innocent as caring for her horse, Gracie was murdered by the man she had warned everyone about. Gracie was only 23 years old when she died. She had her whole life ahead of her. She had a job, a passion for horses, a family who loved her. She was a lifeguard, someone trained to save lives. But when she needed saving, when she needed the police to take her seriously and protect her, they weren't there, and that failure cost Gracie her life. The case of Gracie Spinks should haunt everyone who works in law enforcement. It should be studied in police academies as an example of what happens when stalking reports aren't taken seriously, when warning signs are ignored, when the dots aren't connected. Because this wasn't a case where there was no evidence or no warning. Gracie reported her stalker, weapons were found, the threat was real and documented, and still nothing was done. For Gracie's family, no amount of disciplinary action against the officers involved will bring their daughter back. No law passed in her name will undo the horror of that June morning, but perhaps Gracie's law can save other women. Perhaps her story can be the catalyst for change that ensures other families don't have to experience the same preventable tragedy. Perhaps the next time a young woman reports being stalked, the police will remember Gracie Spinks and do everything in their power to protect her. Gracie's story is a reminder that stalking is not a minor crime. It's not something to be dismissed or deprioritized. It's a serious threat that can escalate to violence and murder. And when someone is brave enough to come forward and report that they're being stalked, they deserve to be believed, protected, and taken seriously. Gracie deserved that, and she didn't get it. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.